providing everybody who is interested with the powers of hypnosis practices. We're staying with the topic of anxiety. And Kim, you are our valued assessor for many, many years. You have read hundreds and hundreds of case studies and assessed them for us. Thank you for that. And you have chosen a particular one. And I would like to know why and what you have chosen.
Yes, well, thank you, Claudia. I chose a case study by Bevan, who's joining us today, on anxiety. Well, it actually presents an issue as procrastination, and he chunks it down beautifully, which you will see later, and it comes into the discussion of anxiety. And in today's day and age, anxiety is actually very relevant. I think a lot of people have situations where they're dealing with expressions of anxiety which come through in different forms, and they're not actually really fully aware with what is the underlying reason or driving force or cause of their situations. And procrastination, I think, is something that all of us can relate to in some degree or another, you know, where we could have done something a bit sooner or wish we had. And the interesting thing about anxiety is it covers such a broad range of expression in levels of intensity as well. So it can come through in a very mild form. And then, of course, it can go through into the more extreme forms where those cases, being a non-medical hypnosis practitioner, those would be diagnosed by the relevant professional. So in these expressions of anxiety, they come through in different ways. For instance, maybe not being able to speak your truth, or being a bit nervous in public, or not being able to connect to someone of authority, or not expressing your ideas. They come through in such subtle ways and very profound ways, which can influence our lives to a large extent, even though we're not that aware of how much impact they're having. Yeah. So a little problem like procrastination actually has long-term effects on our life, which we can quite easily work with, as you will see in this case study. And this is why I chose Bevan's case study, because he took something which appears so simple and so small, and he worked with it in such a beautifully profound way. And it shows the ease at which it can have such a huge impact on our lives. Yes, and I'm sure you also have a lot where you can share about anxiety to give people a greater understanding of how relevant it is to every one of us today, and how easily hypnosis can assist us.
Exactly, because, you know, we're throwing around these words, these terms, and I just want to just say it out loud one more time, that whenever we refer to any, what would you call it, situations or issues that a person may have, we're discussing this from a non-medical hypnotherapy approach. Yes. We don't diagnose, we don't prescribe, and we don't treat. We teach and we practice client-centered hypnotherapy, which means that we facilitate the client to find their answers, their truth. So having said that, I think when people throw around the term anxiety, I think very few people are actually aware what it does in the body. How do thoughts that I have about whatever causes me the anxiety, how does this actually have an effect on the body? How can my heart start racing? How can my palms become sweaty, and I get fluttery? I get unfocused very often with anxiety. And it actually triggers a part of our autonomic nervous system, and it does it very automatically. It has to do with the original fight and flight response. So whether it's real or imagined, and this is very important, whether it's real or imagined, we take a stimulus, and our brain communicates with our autonomic nervous system, and a myriad of chemical effects are happening. And for example, glucose gets pushed into the body to give me more strength. My heart starts beating faster so that the blood supply goes everywhere, gives me more energy to do things. The pupil dilate to give me better vision. My immune system momentarily becomes kind of undefeatable, but of course it collapses over time. And so on and so on. This is just the tip of the iceberg that I'm mentioning here. And we have no control over this. We can't say, oh, isn't so bad. This chemical reaction in my body only needs to be a little bit. The stimulus is there, and shoo, here it happens, you know. And it is this mind-body connection that I don't think everybody is aware of, that it's not something out there. We perceive it. Our brain translated in a language the body can understand, and woof, we are here. Yeah.
And I think this is the real importance of the discussion, is it's so subconsciously driven in a sense that our behavior becomes irrational even to us. You know, why can't we say this? Or why don't I get this done on time? And it's almost like, even in its mild forms, you just watch yourself doing something that you would rather do differently.
Yeah.
And the amazing thing is with the hypnosis, even from the most introductory levels of the client-centered hypnosis, such as your symptomatic treatments, you can really start connecting with yourself through your facilitator, guiding you. You can make these connections where you can have quite impressive shifts and changes.
Absolutely.
And we know as you just start relaxing, immediately you're able to become more clear in your thought, which means you're able to direct your action better. Your fight and flight changes to that so-called rest and digest, and that also gives you more access to your cognitive abilities and to self-control in a positive sense, creative thinking, different ideas, and your world can open up quite profoundly.
Yeah, that's very well said, Kim. Thank you for that. But we don't want to keep this too long. So, Bevan, with no further ado, you had this young lady as a client, and you got permission to discuss what happened in the session with her. So please go ahead.
Thank you. So the young lady is an 18-year-old matriculant preparing for final exams, and she didn't come to me for the exam anxiety as we would imagine at this age. She came to me with procrastination because she's procrastinating with certain past papers and things like that, preparing for the exams. So after a brief discussion with her on the history of her life and anything that may be contributing to this kind of behavior, I found that she's from a divorced family. Her parents got divorced when she was quite young. She was 7. Which had a big impact on her life. She's got siblings, and we then carried on the discussion to what she presented being the procrastination. And procrastination is not something that we can deal with as a client-centered therapist. So I chunked it down, as we call it, to an emotion, because that's what we need to work with. The subconscious is all about emotions. And through a series of questions of who, why, when, what, you know, I managed to get to the core problem, which was the anxiety, that she was anxious about not doing it correctly, and that's why she wouldn't do it.
Well done.
So that's where I got to, and we managed to gauge how stressful it is for her, and some sort of waypoints that we could work with in the coming weeks, so that we could see that we've made some sort of a difference.
Fantastic, fantastic. And you know, this is something that might be interesting to everybody who is watching and listening to this, is sometimes when a problem presents itself, how our techniques, what we do, we kind of find out what is holding this problem up. In other words, we call this a category problem, but something is holding it up. So she came to you with procrastination, and you found that at least one of the legs, if you wanted, that is holding up her procrastination is the anxiety. So I assume, therefore, you decided if you help her with her anxiety, the procrastination would diminish or perhaps go completely away. So how did you deal with this?
Well, in conjunction with that one leg, the second leg is the self-worth that comes from the divorce. And with those two in mind, I decided to use the inner child script that we have, where I let the client connect with their inner self so that they can see that they're worthy and they love themselves. So I proceeded with the induction. I put her into a deep trance and went into the script session, and I got her to connect with herself as a young child. And immediately I did that, the tears started to flow from her eyes, and the sniffing and the crying. And I got her to connect with herself and see whatever she needed at the time and to give it to herself, which she did.
That's amazing.
And,
That's what we call reparenting. Tell me, did you inquire about the age of that inner child?
I didn't ask about the age, but it was still when the parents were together, from what I could gather. So I think it was still quite young.
Okay. So it is quite amazing to see how when we bring, now let me rather explain it properly. So when something happens to a young child, when it is still resourceless, it hasn't learned life yet, and something happens that shouldn't happen, or something that should happen doesn't happen. In other words, a parent that should be loving, caring, sheltering is not available, for example, or even abusive. Or, for example, if her inner child was at an age before the divorce happened, it might as well be that she was witnessing fights or disagreements in the family, and that very often upsets children. So when we bring them, and this really only happens properly in trance, in hypnosis, when we bring these two aspects together, the wise, mature adult, even if she's an 18-year-old, she's much wiser than the little one, right? And when we bring them together, who will know better what that frozen inner child state needs than the actual person? That's why it works so beautiful. And you say she had an app reaction, she started crying. And what do you put this down to? Why do you think she was app reacting?
Well, I think that she could see that at the time she was in a lot of pain and needed a lot of help. And I think from what you're saying, probably in a divorced family, there was a lot of upheaval in the house. But once I'd explained to her that she could give her everything she needed and that she did the best she could with the tools she had available to her, she actually turned into a little smile on her face, and I could see that it was almost like a release where she'd realized that everything was okay.
Yes, and that's what we call subconscious relearning. So we discover the cause, which you kind of even did in this symptomatic case study, right? You discovered the cause, there was a release, and there's a subconscious relearning. So this person in her inner programming has changed now. So after, did you do any more work in the first session, or was that it? Yeah, that was
it. We kept it short, yes. The first session, I don't like to go too long.
Yeah, did it have any effects on her presenting issue being procrastination?
Absolutely. So at the end of the session, we had a brief discussion about what had happened. She was, I would almost say, dazed and confused in her look, because it wasn't something I think she was expecting. And then she went away. I saw her a week later, and yes, she was very joyful that she'd managed to do things that she didn't even think about doing. And afterwards thinking, wow, normally I would have done something different. So yes, it was very good. And we had a follow-up session.
And what happened during the follow-up session?
So on the follow-up session, I decided that I wanted to do the perfect you scenario. So I took her into trance again, and I put her into a place where she created the perfect environment for herself. And I showed her that everything's perfect, and if anything should change, it's not perfect, and therefore she is perfect, which also worked very well. I didn't have tears this time, although I had a lot of smiles and almost grimaces on her face. And yeah, that also worked very well, and she came out of that much more brighter and happier and more talkative at the end of that session.
Okay, and the presenting issue of procrastination, was it now resolved or much less?
Well, I can tell you that she told me she's handed in her art final for matric 2 weeks before the deadline.
Wow. Well, that speaks for itself, huh? That speaks for itself. And are any further session planned with her, or do you think that that issue is done?
No, I'm definitely going to do parts with her.
Okay, okay, right. That's fantastic. And her view of herself suffering from the divorce, or perhaps even blaming herself or being overwhelmed by what she witnessed as a child. Did you discuss this in any way with her?
No,
Yeah.
I stuck to the issue. I didn't want to delve too much into anything that wasn't presented to me.
Yeah, I think that's a very wise decision. And
Step by step.
Kim, when you
Yes.
assess this case study, which is actually really fascinating, I hope it brings a lot of hope to whoever watches this, because you can see if the underlying problem is addressed, the problem will diminish or disappear. What else did you notice in the case study?
Well, what I noticed is how easily, in a sense, once we actually connect with the real feeling experience of what was driving that behavior that wasn't working for us, it becomes very simple and easy for the individual to actually really change it from that place. The understanding, Bevan, you mentioned, that she looked a little dazed when she came out of trance. And this can happen because we find such a richness of information from a real, I get it, I understand it point of view. And, the way you took that case study so gently, and you didn't try and throw like the whole book or everything you thought of there. You took it literally and let the client move in their own space. And we really do have our own answers, especially when we're directly in touch with that part of ourselves that is the experience, the real experience of what's happening, and we're able to hold and take care of it.
Ah, that's beautifully said.
Yeah.
Thank you, Kim.
So it's,
Thank you.
Yeah.
it's
And
such a
Bevan,
pleasure. Thank you. I really,
Bevan, would
word.
you like to say something in closing?
No, I just think that this is a very powerful tool that we have available to people, where we can help them get through the issues that they don't even know are there. So yes, I think hypnosis is something very powerful.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, the two of you. I think a lot of people that feel that procrastination or anxiety as a category problem speaks to them. I hope we've given them some hope. And I thank you for your participation. I'm looking forward to do many more.